We try to focus our company on creating great user experience. Well, I don't measure my success in sort of dollar terms. And, I have pretty modest lifestyle, so for any reasonable set of assumptions, I'll be plenty comfortable.
It's hard to imagine a world without Google. We take it for granted. But not so long ago, it was nearly impossible to find what you were looking for on the internet. In the past 20 years, internet search has advanced tremendously. Along with Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook, Google is one of the big 5 companies in the US tech industry. And it's the 3rd most valuable brand in the world after Apple and Amazon. As of 2021, billions of searches occur on Google every day. What we don't know, we Google. And we have an answer to our question in a split second. Although everyone knows the top mega billionaires in the world like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg, there is one mega corporation whose founders aren't nearly as well known. Google is no doubt one of the most influential companies in the world. Despite this, not many people know the geniuses behind the revolution. Sergey Brin and Larry Page are the masterminds behind the phenomena. They changed the world as we know it. With a net worth close to $100 billion each, they are among the 10 wealthiest people in the world. And Google itself is worth more than $400 billion. Every few years, a company comes along and try to change the way we do things. However, many startups of Silicon Valley try and never make it. They succeeded. This is the incredible and unlikely tale of Google. At the dawn of the web in the 90s, searching the internet was rudimentary, hit or miss, and often returning useless or irrelevant results. The pages were long, and the process was very slow. A lot of people were experimenting with this new medium. Companies like AltaVista, Excite, Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, and Lycos were all search engines long before Google. However, searching the web was nowhere near helpful. This would soon change. Google would go further than any competitor had previously gone. It all started in the summer of 1995, when a second-year graduate student called Sergey Brin was giving a tour of Stanford University and nearby San Francisco to other prospective students. Larry Page, an engineering graduate from the University of Michigan, ended up in his group. Larry Page was born in Michigan in 1973. His parents were both computer experts. Following their footsteps, he went on to study computer engineering at Stanford University. Larry was an inventor, introverted, and his fascination with computers began at an early age. Sergey Brin was born the same year in Moscow, Russia. His mother was a NASA scientist, and his father was a math professor. He and his family immigrated to the U.S. when he was 6 to escape Jewish persecution in Russia. Young Sergey was a math prodigy. After studying mathematics and computer science at the University of Maryland, he would enroll at Stanford for his PhD, where he met Larry. The two found each other obnoxious at first. Brin has said jokingly about their encounter in an interview later on. But obviously, they would end up forming a very good pair. California in the early 90s was the land of opportunities. In the heart of Silicon Valley was the home of legendary tech names like Apple and Microsoft, where great minds meet and miracles happen. It was the place to go for aspiring tech entrepreneurs. As they were both PhD students in the computer science graduate program at Stanford, they began Google as a research project, originally called Backrub in 1996. They were on a mission to find a radically better way to search the web. What they did, no one had done before, and it changed everything. Page came up with the idea to use backlinks to help rank websites based on relevance, reliability, and user feedback. They would search the web for new content and patterns. They created Backrub, the predecessor to Google. The ranking system rewarded links that came up from sources that were important and penalized those that did not. Backrub was complex. It demanded huge computing resources and also required extremely complex mathematics, which is where the prodigy Brin came in. In 1996, they began experimenting with the Stanford homepage and soon came up with the PageRank algorithm. This ranking system would become the foundation of Google search. Page and Brin started off with an ambitious dream. Little did the world know they were onto something big. Now they had their secret formula. It needed a name that would be as grand as their vision. And they thought about the mathematical term of this giant number, 1, followed by 100 zeros, commonly known as Google, Googol. But they discovered it was already owned, so they did a play on it and spelt it differently. On August 1996, Google was created. It was a hit on the Stanford campus at first. Their dorm room had quickly turned into an office and programming center. On September 15, 1997, they registered Google as a website. However, Page and Brin weren't sure they wanted to start running a company full-time. During Page's first year at Stanford, his father died. This was a disaster for him, and he saw finishing his PhD as some sort of a tribute to him. But he was also inspired by him to go on to try something new. Brin was also reluctant to leave the program, given his own academic upbringing. Brin remembers his advisor telling him, "Look, if this Google thing pans out, then great. If not, you can return to graduate school and finish your thesis." To that, Brin chuckled, then added, "Yeah, okay, why not? I'll just give it a try." In the end, they both decided to drop out of Stanford to focus on their new venture. As it was a new company, investors were skeptical. At the time, there were 5 search engines. Investor Ram Shriram thought, why would the world need a 6th search engine? No one was buying into Google at first. Even its founders struggled to see its potential, as they would try to sell it a few years later. In 1998, they got their first check of $100,000 by Andy Bechtolsheim, a co-founder of Sun Microsystems. Ram Shriram and 2 other investors, Jeff Bezos, Amazon.com founder, and David Sheraton, a Stanford University professor, finally agreed to invest. Together, they raised $1 million to help Google getting off the ground. They continued to receive several other investments, and a new one of $25 million was invested by venture capital firms. After that investment, Google Company was incorporated on September 4th, 1998. Later that month, the duo moved out of their dorm rooms and relocated into the garage of their friend Susan Wojcicki in Menlo Park, California. It would be their first office, with a ping pong table and bright blue carpet. It could have been worse. In 1998 and early 1999, Page and Brin attempted to sell Google for $1 million to Excite, AltaVista, and Yahoo, but to no avail. They all rejected them. With no buyer in sight, Google started hiring. They needed to find first-rate engineers and people who would meet their high standards. Their first employee was Craig Silverstein, a fellow PhD student at Stanford. Chris Sacca, a former Google employee, declared that the hiring process was one of the most intense in the world. He had to go through 12 to 15 interviews over just a couple of days. And it has become even more strict over the years. As one of the top companies to work for, the tech giant receives more than 1 million applications every year. The hiring rate is less than 1%, which means there is a better chance to get into Harvard than getting hired at Google. From the beginning, Page and Brin always made sure that they surrounded themselves with the most brilliant people that they could find. After the incorporation, there was rapid growth, and in March 1999, they moved out of the garage to an actual office in Palo Alto. Google was unconventional. Firstly, the media had always been supported by advertising. Google was not, or at least not yet. Secondly, while most websites were preventing users from migrating to another page, Google did the opposite. In fact, it did the unthinkable. It helped users to explore the wider web, but they still weren't making money. Although Google is now one of the most powerful ad platforms on the planet, Page and Brin were reluctant to turn their site into an ad-selling machine at first. Unlike other search rivals Yahoo and AOL, their homepage was clean and efficient. They had so far refused to clutter their homepage with ads and pop-ups. Their focus was on building user trust. But no ads meant no revenue, so they had to accept that ads were their only options. In October 2000, Google embarked on a new business, online advertising. They came up with a way to make ads small, not flashing or popping up, but instead discreet. It seems familiar now, but back then it was revolutionary. Their move worked. Money started flooding in. By September 2000, their revenue exploded. Google is now available in 149 languages, while back then only 15. It gets 90% of its revenues from advertising, and the other 10% comes from other internet and product services.
We try to focus our company on creating great user experience. I don't measure my success in sort of dollar terms, and I have pretty modest lifestyle, so for any reasonable set of assumptions, I'll be plenty comfortable.
What car do you drive?
I have a $20,000 Toyota.
If Google does float on the stock exchange, Mr. Brin wants to stay true to his California dream by keeping it one of the simplest and yet most technically advanced websites ever built.
With its tremendous growth, they were still yet to hire an experienced CEO to run the place. Seeking so-called adult supervision for the company, Eric Schmidt, who had an engineering background, was hired first as chairman and CEO, taking over from Page. Google founders were enthusiastic and regular participants in Burning Man, the famous annual art festival held in the middle of the Nevada desert, where creative minds can meet and experience a feeling of flow and spiritual social bonding in a wild and extreme environment. They hired Schmidt over some 50 other candidates because he had been to the festival and had connected with them both. Page became president of products, and Brin the president of technology. The two founders kept backing each other up. This was one of the great strengths of the company. They would still be the creative minds and play integral roles behind the scene. But from then on, Schmidt would be the company's face and leader. With its new CEO in place, Google kept up its spectacular evolution. And its rivals slowly faded away. In 2002, internet giant Yahoo tried to buy Google for $3 billion as they wanted in on its fast-growing business. It was then an excessive amount of money for a startup, but Yahoo had missed their chance. Brin and Page didn't bite. They no longer had the desire to sell. By 2003, the company had outgrown 2 other locations and leased a large complex in Mountain View. They called it the Googleplex.
And demand for what Google does has swollen its workforce to over 1,000 strong, the pick of the crop of America's geeks and nerds. In the company canteen, the food is free and supplied by the caterer who used to cook for the rock group, the Grateful Dead. Yes, this is a very hip place to be, and almost nobody looks over the age of 30. Every few years, a company comes along which tries to change the way we do things. I'm thinking about Apple Computers or Microsoft. Well, now Google is trying to change the way we work, the way we shop, the way we lead our lives. So it's no wonder this place is so full of energy and enthusiasm. Wouldn't you be excited if you were onto something big?
The company bought the property at $319 million in 2006. The Googleplex was designed to make the employees feel like their best. It offered them swimming pools, volleyball courts, and laundry services, childcare, and free food. They developed the informal company motto of "Don't be evil." In June 2003, they launched Google AdSense, an advertisement program for websites. It is now one of the largest ad networks in the world. By this time, Google was already the go-to service all over the world, and it was on the fast track to the top of the tech industry.
I liked the service so much that I just wanted to have it around, and I really didn't have a clue of how they would make money, but I figured that something that valuable had to be valuable.
In the coastal resort of Santa Cruz,
take care.
Internet surfers wouldn't use anything else. In fact, all over the world, 140,000 Google searches a minute, profits from advertising estimated at $100 million a year. Internet cafes like this one, Googling away. What do you use it for?
Well, if I have any kind of question whatsoever, regardless of what subject it's related to, I'll start by typing that question or some keywords from that question into Google and see where that takes me.
So has it changed your life?
As much as anything computer-related can change your life.
And Google's entered the language, as Xerox and Hoover did before it.
The person that I'm seeing before we went on our first date, I Googled him just because I didn't know him very well and wanted to, sort of see if he was a criminal.
In April 2004, Google launched Gmail, which became the world's largest email service in less than a decade. It now boasts over 1 billion active users worldwide. Google linked to 3 billion web pages, and their partnership with AOL brought them 34 million new customers. What was the next step to bring it to the next level? It was time for Google to float on the stock exchange. They continued being unconventional. They set their IPO price via an auction to get the greatest value. On August 19, 2004, they went public and raised $1.7 billion, making the company worth more than $27 billion, and both its founders billionaires. Page, Brin, and Schmidt agreed to work together for 20 years until 2024. Soon, the company expanded even more with Google Maps, Google News, and Google Earth. They had finally built a reputation, and their bold ideas had worked. Google even made it into dictionaries as a verb, and it became part of our culture. However, they were struggling with privacy issues with Gmail.
What Google's trying to do is to target stuff particularly at you. So whereas spam emails are blanket targeted at everybody, they don't care who you are, they just want to say the same thing to everybody. Google are doing the exact opposite, which is to say, rather than sending something that's not specific to you, they want to tailor things that are exactly identical to your profile.
People didn't like the fact that their personal information were recorded so that ads could be targeted. Their "don't be evil" philosophy was brought into question for the first time. In the summer of 2005, Google embarked on its next big adventure. One of Page's clearest visions was the rise of mobile phones. And he quickly went on to buy a small startup called Android in August for $50 million. He did so without telling CEO Schmidt. Page believed that this move could help the company get into the mobile software market. Of course, Android would go on to become the most popular mobile operating system in the world. Google wanted to continue expanding around the globe. In 2006, it reached an agreement with China for access to their 400 million web users, but with one condition. They would have to censor banned topics. This raised a lot of controversies. They had to self-censor a fair amount. Google ended up agreeing to China's demands because they knew it was the biggest consumer market in the world. However, in January 2010, they discovered cyber attacks on their system. Google pulled the plug, withdrew from China, and redirected users to an unfiltered site in Hong Kong where they wouldn't have to censor. By July 2006, users of the popular video sharing site YouTube were uploading 65,000 videos a day, and Google wanted in. They acquired YouTube in October 2006 for $1.65 billion. YouTube founders were thrilled. In 2007, Google entered a clash with another one of the biggest companies in the world. Apple launched their iPhone in January, and it was a phenomenal success. A year later, Brin and Page announced their Android operating system with a variety of mobile phones. Their longtime idol, who was now a rival, Steve Jobs, slammed Google for entering the phone business and accused them of trying to kill the iPhone. In May 2007, Google took a new turn. They came up with a new ambitious feature. They called it Street View, which was an attempt to photograph every neighborhood on the planet. However, the service involved taking private data from unsecured Wi-Fi locations, and people didn't like the idea that themselves or their home could be photographed from the outside. Many people found their privacy to be compromised. Google declared that people's faces would be blurred and that they would make sure no one could be identified.
We showed some of the images to people on the very streets that were photographed.
It can be really invasive, and I mean, I think we live in an age where you can just get any bit of information from the internet.
Everyone has a right to his own image, in certain countries at least, so they should be allowed to ask Google to remove this at the very least.
You've got the geospatial technology. What about a bit of common sense now? I mean, fancy taking photographs of people being arrested and using it in this way.
The car's picked up tens of millions of images, and in the vast majority of cases there's absolutely no problem whatsoever. It's entirely to be expected that one or two strange scenes have been caught, and we've seen some of those today.
But fancy photographing the exterior of a sex shop, for example, or people being sick in the street.
Well, it's not. The cars go round and they pick up the images as the cars drive up and down the street.
Google acknowledged the mistake, saying they screwed up on Street View. Then they agreed to destroy the data. In September 2008, Google launched Google Chrome browser, thanks to the suggestion of their product manager, Sundar Pichai. The browser now dominates the internet and is one of Pichai's most stunning business successes, which without doubt helped push him toward the role of CEO years later. Apple wasn't Google's sole big rival. There was also Microsoft. Bill Gates even declared that he saw Google as one of his greatest competitors.
The breadth of our research and the incredible people that we have really lets us do big advances in software. It's great to have Google out there. We have other areas like tablet, PC, or media center. We don't have competitors who really stayed in those things. So it's really pushing us on the internet search. We enjoy that. Fear's not the right word, but the value of competition and the enjoyment and the visibility that brings, that's great. We've had competitors at every stage of our history. And so when new competitors come along, it's great for consumers. Internet search, I can guarantee you, will be far better even a year from now than it is today. And that's because both Microsoft and Google will improve the search and, in fact, even take some of that advertising revenue and give that back to the end user, because it'll be way more competitive than it is right at the moment.
Both were ruthless and hungry for success. As Microsoft got slower over the years, Google made a place for itself in the internet area.
Microsoft faces enormous challenges from the likes of Google, the very nature of computing, changing away from the desktop-based software pioneered by Gates to email and spreadsheets delivered via the internet.
Microsoft has gotten slower over the years, and there are other companies like Google, for example, that are, making their name a name for themselves in this new era, in the internet era.
But having such success comes with making enemies. After Bill Gates and Microsoft being seen as the evil empire, it was Google's turn to be the villain. While the two founders thought they were doing something to better the world, their own slogan, "Don't be evil," was once more being used against them. Around this time, Google was faced with another aggressive new challenger: Mark Zuckerberg. The arrival of the social media giant blindsided Google. In 2010, Facebook passed Google again as the most visited U.S. site. Facebook's membership worldwide had doubled in the previous year to 500 million users. The users started to do less web search through Google, as they could find more information straight into the mobile app. So far, Google's efforts at social networking had failed. The rise of Facebook marked a shift in how users used the internet. Whilst in the past, people were using it to get information, now they started using it to organize their lives and connect with their friends. However, Paige and Brin were very well aware that users' habits on the web change, and they were determined to make the website more user-friendly. Google made its largest acquisition ever on August 15, 2011. They bought Motorola Mobility for $12.5 million. That same year, there was an unexpected Silicon Valley shakeup. After 10 years, CEO Eric Schmidt announced that he was stepping down from his role to let Larry Page take over, as he was finally ready to take the reins. Schmidt tweeted, "Day-to-day adult supervision no longer needed." However, Page suffered from a health condition that was going to riddle his leadership. In 2012, he was struck by vocal cord paralysis, making it very difficult for him to talk, especially to large crowds. Consequently, as his voice became increasingly quiet and hoarse, he started skipping calls and slowly eliminated all public speaking events. Over the next few years, Google continued to innovate. Back in 2009, Google entered one of the most exciting industries in the coming decades. The hype around self-driving cars has grown rapidly over the past several years, with many big tech companies getting behind the concept. Google started their own project called Waymo. In 2018, they announced that they would be making self-driving cars available by 2020. However, despite some extraordinary advancements, in 2020, they are still out of reach, even though some companies have started testing them out. There is a technical revolution coming, and Google is one of the companies that plans for the future and adjusts to the world's evolution. In 2012, Sergey Brin came up with a new invention. He showed off their new Google Glass project with a live skydiving demo from the futuristic eyewear. This was one of the first products of Google X, their internal research lab known as the Moonshot Factory. It was by far the most impressive tech demo since the unveiling of the iPhone, although Page's condition made him miss the conference. In 2012, for the first time ever, Google announced an annual revenue of $50 billion, a significant increase from the previous year. In May 2013, Page announced his vision for Google Island, an ideal world where technical progress wouldn't be regulated so much. It was one of his most high-profile talks and one of his last public speaking engagements. It would never become more than an idea. Google acquired Waze for $966 million in June 2013. Then, in September 2013, Google created Calico to focus on life extension. However, it seems that most of the ideas have failed at making any advancements. This constant drive for innovations and creations in different industries is very much an attempt for Page and Brin to show the world that Google is about much more than boring web products. But more importantly, they always try to find new areas where they can provide value to their customers. Within its domain, Google is constantly adapting and changing based on what users want and enjoy. Perpetual improvement is the hallmark of its dominance. By 2015, the company was involved in a large range of various industries, and it was time, in Page and Brin's eyes, to shake things up. Page wrote, quote, "Our company is operating well today, but we think we can make it cleaner and more accountable. So we're creating a new company." In August 2015, Google made a sudden shakeup to its structure. Alphabet was created and became the parent holding company of Google. As a parent company, Alphabet allowed Google to expand into domains outside of internet search. After the restructure, Page became the CEO of Alphabet. Brin became its president. And Sundar Pichai was named CEO of Google. In the restructuring process, Google ditched their official motto, "Don't be evil," and replaced it as "Do the right thing." After Page and Brin stepped back, Google went through a troubling time, as it came under more and more intense scrutiny. In 2017, Google was fined $2.7 billion for violating antitrust laws and manipulating their search results. Although this didn't stop Google from taking Apple's spot as the most valuable brand in the world that same year. Then 2019. It's officially the end of an era at Google. As the company faced investigations and mounting employee unrest, both Page and Brin let go of the steering wheel and completely stepped away in December 2019. Sundar Pichai became the CEO of Google and Alphabet. This didn't come as a shock, as they weren't so deeply involved in the company's day-to-day operations anymore. Page more or less disappeared off the face of the earth. Both he and Brin had hardly been seen or heard from in the past years. Both men have always been rather discreet. In fact, they could possibly be two of the most mysterious tech leaders of a generation, as they kept most of their private lives for themselves. Nonetheless, both are leaving a long-lasting legacy behind. In the space of a year, they both got married. Page married research scientist Lucinda Southworth back in 2007 on Richard Branson's private island in the Caribbean. Branson was also his best man. Brin married biotech specialist Anne Wojcicki, the sister of his friend Susan Wojcicki, whose garage they started the company in back in 1997. The two married in the Bahamas, with their partner Larry Page standing up for him. Both Page and Brin have 2 children. However, in early 2014, a disastrous series of headlines came out detailing Brin's extramarital affair with Google Glass marketing manager Amanda Rosenberg. Following the affair, Brin and Anne would divorce in 2015. Brin married attorney Nicole Shanahan in 2018. Looking back at the big moments in both men's careers and how the actions they took have had a monumental impact, not just on the internet, but on society itself. We can see that what they've built will likely last for decades to come. Google now has a whole lot of apps and tools that we use on a daily basis. Google.org, its philanthropic platform, has contributed over $100 million to various organizations, from clean energy to global health. In 14 years, Google grew from startup to technology giant. In April 2020, they announced various cost-cutting measures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But Google is still one of the most visited websites all over the world. Although it faces a lot of criticisms, such as tax avoidance and privacy, among others, the company has defied the odds and continues to grow. It has had many big successes, but it also failed many times. Nevertheless, it is so powerful that even when it suffers setbacks, it always manages to work its way back to the top. It's always stayed true to its original mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. We've come so far since the days internet search was not so useful. The history of search is fascinating, because initially, no one would have expected an upstart like Google would dominate the planet. However, Brin and Page were the ones who first started to understand what customers wanted. They have changed the way we get information, and thanks to them, they've allowed us to ever expand our knowledge. From college dropouts to influential leaders, they grew a small startup from a garage into one of the biggest multinational tech companies in the world. There are around 4 billion internet users all around the globe, and the number of Google users is nearly 4 billion. Google's founders might not have a huge fan base like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk. They also don't have a large hatred like Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg. Most people don't know who they are, and they aren't widely credited for revolutionizing the internet. But their accomplishment and their devotion to innovation can be applauded. Their risk-taking attitude, fierceness, and ambition took them to unbelievable heights. And Google has carved its way into our everyday lives. It's easy to see how far it has come when we think about the time Page and Brin tried to sell the company for $1 million to Yahoo back in 1999, more than 20 years ago. And now is worth near to $1 trillion. This was the incredible story of how Sergey Brin and Larry Page built the search giant that shaped the world. And that we simply can't live without.